Welcome to Talk Mental Health with Logan Noon. This is episode 55, Women in Academia. Today's a little different. I interview 3 guests all at once. It was a great episode. I really think you guys are going to like this one. I'm talking with Dr. Emily Oestreich, Dr. Julie Randolph-Habecker, and Dr. Janelle Mapes. We talk about how women's experience in academia and science has changed over time. We talk about why sexual harassment is more prevalent in science and medicine. And lastly, we talk about how we all experience sexual harassment at our own campus and how we dealt with that and how we're trying to improve the culture here at PNWU. So a little bit about these professors. Dr. Emily Oestreich is Assistant Dean of Preclinical Education here. She got her PhD in Pharmacology at University of Rochester. We're also talking with Dr. Julie Randolph-Habecker. She's a professor in pathology here. She got her PhD at The Ohio State University, and she also performed a postdoc fellowship at the Hutchinson Cancer Research Center in Seattle, Washington. And our third guest is Dr. Janelle Mapes. She is an assistant professor in anatomy here. She got her PhD in molecular and integrative physiology at University of Illinois. So longest intro I've ever done. Without further ado, let's get going. Dr. Mapes for the win.
I know how to use
Fixes
my own
the microphone.
What did you do? Turn it on?
There's a mute button.
Yeah, so this is in typical Logan Noon fashion. I screwed it up.
And now it's working?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, before this started, Dr. Mapes was like, wait, should you do it in a small room because it reduces the echo? I was like, oh yeah. We should do that. This is the 55th episode I've done. Yeah, and I'm like, I don't know. Barely scraped by as a med student, barely scraped by as a podcaster. What else is new? Okay, so let's now do the intros again.
Solid 4 minutes. I feel bad for everybody that missed that.
Yeah, I mean, all right, let's keep it fast. let's move on here. Or I'll just do the intros after. I'll do it myself and just totally butcher it.
Oh,
and it's going to be even better. But so what we're talking about today is women's experience being as a professor in medicine. I want to do a follow-up episode where I interview 3 or 4 different female physicians. You guys are all scientists, so I kind of want to get your perspective. But I've had some weird kind of gender situations as a third-year clinical student. I'll share those stories with you guys and get your input. And also, I know that obviously women have been discriminated against, but things are better than they were. So I want to hear how things have improved, but where we still need to improve upon, because I would like to be one of your colleagues one day. I would like to, practice psychiatry, but I would love to be a visiting professor teaching psychiatry at a school. I think that would be just a tremendous career path for me.
I would say things are different.
Yes.
Okay.
I wouldn't say they're better.
Well, I'd love you to explain more. So why don't you go on about that? No, I'm done.
Shut down.
I would say, we tend to say things are better because, yes, there are more women entering professions, there's more enrollment, but there's not necessarily support for women once they get into positions. And things have moved from the, I like to say, the Weinsteinian. So it's not so much, Harold Weinstein, who is quite infamous for...
I was like, should I know who Weinsteinian is?
Yeah, for his shenanigans. Weinstein, yes. So it's not so much dropping your pants in front of a female student. Which has happened to colleagues of mine. And just outright sexual harassment or even sexual assault. A lot more of it now is... more subtle, and it's just as damaging. So we can kind of talk about that, but there's definitely a shift, and I would say what has gotten better is you don't really have to learn how to push someone off of you at a conference, although that still happens from time to time.
Jeez.
Yeah. Or you don't have to make sure that there's another student in the room when you meet with your advisor, because your current advisor might try to jump on you. but there is definitely, discrimination, gender bias, that's actually gotten worse in the last couple of years, I think, because of the national.
You can't drop your pants anymore. So what do you
think? Yeah, you can't drop your pants, but you can grab them. By the parts. So that is so we've taken a little step back with some of the current language that's now allowed.
Yeah. So, I mean, from my perspective, of course, being a dude, I know that, of course, all this discrimination exists, but firsthand, I haven't experienced it. I hope I haven't inflicted discrimination on others, even though I'm sure innocently I probably have. But, when I entered medical school, it was 2017, and Dr. Mapes, one of the articles you sent me today, in 2017 was the first year that more women were in medical school than men on the whole. And in our medical school class, I don't know the exact numbers, but there were a few more females.
It was 52% for your class.
Yeah, something like that. And that was really cool to see. And I don't know, maybe you guys do, the faculty number seemed like balanced-ish at our school. And so I was like, okay, this seems like a rather progressive place to be. But then further along in that article that you sent me, it's like, okay, in 2017, we have more women that are in medical school matriculating, but only 18% of medical deans are female, and only 13% of healthcare CEOs are female. Mm-hmm. So it's clearly beyond medical students, this is still a big, big, big issue. So I guess going back to the first part of the discussion, 10 years ago, or when you first started this career till now, what changes have you guys seen?
I think in general there are more women around, right? So in my science classes in college, there were more women. There were more women that intended to enter a STEM field of some sort. But you kind of hit the nail on the head there, which is that by the time you get to the career part, there's still some subtle and some not so subtle instances of gender bias that prevent women from really advancing in their career path. And so people will say, well, it's because women drop out to go have families and women aren't as focused as men and all that kind of stuff. But that's really not it. It doesn't explain those numbers. Why are only 8% of university presidents female? That's crazy. Mm-hmm. So yes, we've achieved parity in terms of admissions into health science programs and medical school and graduate programs, but that parity doesn't play out when it comes to career advancement through academic ranks. So most women somehow get stuck at the assistant level. A few more make it to associate, very few make it to full professor at this point, and the administrative numbers are pretty dire. Mm-hmm. And then if you look at pay scales, again, plenty of us entering the profession, but we're still not getting paid like the boys do. So still a long way to go.
Mm-hmm.
What about you, Dr. Mapes? Awfully silent over there.
I'm just trying to recover my breathing rate back to normal.
Yeah, your heart rate's probably still at 150. Yeah. Everyone forgive Dr. Mapes. She just taught a cycling class. I've been sitting on my fat butt all day.
In the corner.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I think I felt it a lot in grad. I mean, so this is only my third year here at PNWU, but I felt it a lot in graduate school. Just kind of looking around to see how many faculty there were that were female. It's a little bit different as a principal investigator. You have to run your own lab and you have to submit grants, and that can be really difficult when you're not part of the good old boys club. Mm-hmm. Because the people that are reviewing the grants, the people that are keeping your career alive, because if without grants you can't be a functioning PI, then they struggle to keep their lab afloat. And so it was really, I lucked out. I had two amazing female mentors on the floor that I worked on in grad school, and I was at their desks, at their doors all the time, just asking for just general advice. It's always fun when you're at a conference presenting your research and a man comes over and tries to explain your research to you, and you're like,
explaining.
You're like, this is, I've been working on this for 5 years of my life, I've been reading every article. And I'm the one that did the work. Yes, I know. I understand what these results are because I'm the one that did the experiment. So I think I felt it a lot more in grad school. Here, again, we had kind of talked about this the other day. I don't know if it's just because I'm young and I look even younger, whether or not it's because I'm a woman or because I'm young. The way that, the subtle differences that students treat you and other, especially male faculty, treat you, it's a little bit different. We end up, as women, doing a lot more emotional labor, which now is the young, cool, hip faculty member.
Yeah.
Why are you looking at me?
Yeah, because you're the one who's
I don't
mad
understand
about
what's happening.
I'm sorry that I replaced you. You're still amazing.
I provide plenty of emotional support.
Yeah. So, I know all three of us get a lot of people in our offices that just need someone to vent to. They just need someone to listen to.
That's why we have Kleenex and chocolate.
Yeah. And it's not something that, if it stopped tomorrow, I would be very sad. But, I also don't know how much that's really valued by administration, how much time and effort that I put into just generally supporting the emotional, mental, physical health of students. As opposed to...
That's probably part of the things that tend to hold women back in academia in terms of advancing in rank, because the things that people care about when it comes to promotion applications, the language that's used to describe men versus the language that's used to describe women. Women are very collaborative, women are team players, and all that's great, but men are leaders and men are innovative, and women do the emotional support work for the students, but men are, role models, and it's those kinds of subtle things that show up in the way that you're described, even, that can change the way you're viewed by reappointment and promotions committees.
And we do a lot more service work when you start to look at committee assignments and not necessarily chair positions on committees, but the work that gets done on committees. A lot of it gets, and this is not just here, it's science. Somebody did a study. Women tend to fill more positions on committees, which takes a lot of time, but isn't always valued when it comes to promotion. But when I think the problem is not getting women into slots anymore. We're doing better at that. It's now the inclusion piece. So, when I was in graduate school, my first lab, there's a reason I have a master's in clinical chemistry. It's not because I didn't want to stop at a master's. It was just that environment and that laboratory I didn't want to stay there for another 5 years. So the person I worked with, first of all, was very angry that after he accepted me into his lab that I had the nerve to get engaged. And then I had planned to get married. I gave him 2 years notice. And his entire attitude towards me had changed at that point. Because I was just going to go off and have kids, which I don't have. And I wasn't going to move forward in my career, which I did. And then, quite frankly, he started to sexually harass me.
Wow. So
it got to the point where I didn't feel comfortable being in a room with him alone. So I had this awesome lab mate who found an excuse every time to be in the room when John would stop by and attend all of our meetings, because he was my collaborator. And even when I went to conferences, we roomed together because I didn't feel comfortable because John knew where I was staying. So then I left and got I got a master's. So then I had to go to a new lab and start all over.
Wow.
So that's another, and that's not a story unique to me. Where I was, I knew several women who did the same thing, who either weren't getting support or were being harassed or something. And so that puts women behind again. They got to start all over. So that's another reason why women don't progress as quickly. And that's my chair, by the way. That's
whatever.
That's squeaky.
That's what they all say. Fartgate 2019.
So those, we're spending a lot of time looking at what's shuttling women out of that track. What's keeping them from progressing? What's causing them to leave?
So there was one interesting bias that was in one of the articles that you sent me, where it talked about how, if you look at two applicants, a man versus a woman, kind of, the job holder or administrator, for lack of a better word, typically views the man, this man has so much potential, and they look at that potential. But women, they seem to look at all this performance maybe that they've done, they more objectively look at them in those measures, but then they have that liability in their head, like, is this woman going to get married, or is this woman going to choose to have kids, or whatever. How have you guys dealt with that bias? Have you dealt with that bias, and how did you handle it?
Well, first I'll say women also have that liability in their own heads.
Yeah.
Because research has shown that when you look at a job search and the criteria for the position in that job search, a man will apply for that job when he meets 40 to 60% of the criteria, but a woman will wait until she meets 100% of the criteria. So there's something in our heads that say, well, I should actually be qualified for this job before I apply for it, and men haven't really had to meet that same standard. And then you get the double whammy when you get on the other side of the table and the person looking at it says, the woman's not meeting the job criteria. Ooh, but look at this man with all this potential. So there is that. But I just wanted to go back to something you said a little while ago, which is that you had two really good female mentors on your floor. I have none. Which was kind of crazy. My graduate class was probably 70% female, I think, but my committee, 5 faculty members in a department of maybe 20 total, they were all men.
My committee was all men too.
Can you define, because some of the listeners, and even me, when you say committee, is that?
Oh, sure. So graduate school's different. We don't have a lot of multiple choice examinations. Our coursework, or at least in my program, my heavy coursework was essentially over within the first year. And so then you're preparing for what's called your qualifying exam, which for my program, and I'm guessing it's similar for you guys, we were asked to write a 10-page grant-style proposal, give a public seminar, and then the qualifying exam for me was an oral defense of that.
Okay.
Essentially. So the committee is the group that's tasked with giving you that oral examination.
And so they decide whether you can stay and finish your PhD, or whether you're qualified to do a PhD.
So you have to pass that exam to move forward. So yeah, I did that for 3 hours and 45 minutes around a table with 5 old white men.
Oh, okay. Wow. Okay.
Mine was a little different format, but it was the same deal.
Yeah. I had a good experience. I mean, they grilled me, but I didn't feel at any point as if they weren't being fair. One of them was kind of a dick because he took out my proposal and I had used the word complementary in it to describe something, and he was like, well, what do you call 2 angles that add up to 90 degrees? And I was like, complementary. And then he said, and he gave the other definition of complementary. He's like, why'd you spell it that way? I'm like, he was like, and this was on hour 3, so I was pretty tired. But I don't think that they were biased against me in that. But it's just a weird feeling to go into a room with 5 men knowing that they're going to decide what happens to you next.
Hold your fate.
Yeah. And so that was an interesting experience. And I think it just, as a female student, it makes you think a lot more about how you're going to carry yourself and present yourself in that room, what you're going to wear, what you're going to do with your hair that day, what you're going to do with your makeup that day.
Yeah.
I wore probably 3-inch heels because I wanted to be taller than everyone in the room. I have that advantage, I can be taller than or look most men in the eye, which I think is actually a huge advantage for a woman. The shorties in the room are mad. But it's sad that's something that makes me feel like, I'm considered more equal.
Yeah.
Because I'm physically more equal. It's like a weird thing.
Yeah. And
none of my peers spent 2 hours going through their closet.
No.
None of my male peers.
Just
trying to decide,
what are you going to remember? What you?
Oh, I absolutely remember exactly what I wore
for your.
I looked like Anthony Lyons the day of my qualifying.
It's not a bad thing.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's hard when you have a short torso too to not wear shirts that are too low cut, or making sure you have like short sleeves because you're gonna get like anxious and sweaty, but then like you can't have short sleeves on because then you're you're exposing skin. And I also, when I was in grad school, so I grew up in Lynn, Massachusetts, and so I did have a Boston accent when I moved to Illinois, and that was one thing that I was like, man, everybody's laughing at me when I talk. I can't have this happen when I give my qualifying exam. I can't have this happen when I give seminars, and so I worked really, really hard to pick up that Midwestern accent, to drop. It still happens. What did I say this morning? Walmart. So, it's still, it hits me every once in a while.
Which is the classiest thing to say in a Walmart.
It's specific things that Brett
go down to the car park at Walmart. Buy some carrots.
But that was like a big thing for me, was to make sure that because that was the one thing that I could do, was to make myself be taken more seriously. I can't age myself. I can't grow taller. So, it's more like the demeanor, the way that I carry myself, that I put on this confidence, and that I can have this kind of more eloquent way of speaking to kind of help people maybe listen to me a tiny bit more, a little smidgen more.
And I can probably guarantee you that the amount of prep that we put into those exams was...
Well, I remember
5 to 10 times.
Yeah, in that transition between my master's and my PhD, I went to talk to a woman who I admired a great deal, super smart, and she said, look, I'm going to be 5 times harder on you than any male student in my lab, because you're going to have to perform to that level just to be considered equal. And it was like, that's not fair, That's bullshit,
Ooh, so, there we go.
We got her.
That's baloney. And tomfoolery.
Shenanigans.
So I said, no way. I'm gonna work with this other and my second lab was great, but I still saw inequities in how the male graduate students were treated versus the female graduate students. They got more resources, they got more tech assistance, they got more money. It's the little things that maybe you don't realize as a white guy what women go through. And I don't know what women of color go through. I'm white. So that affords me a great deal of privilege. And, to be able to at least have, that, at least all the people in the room with me were white. But to come into that as a woman of color is super, it's 10 times harder than I'm sure that I can imagine.
And I sometimes think teachers, professors unconsciously have like a gender bias. For instance, there was one course I was taking here, doesn't matter what it was.
I bet we can guess.
But I had a female partner, and we each performed our, clinical stuff that we had to do. And the professor was significantly easier on me than the female, and it was a female professor. And so I wonder, if females are harder on females. And likewise, I've had males.
I gotta be so careful, because I do. So I was super excited when the CIL, like in CILs, that we had that random student generator. I'm like, great. So now that takes out the bias of me picking on the first hands or men over women. And then I started to realize I was harder on the women. And I think because I have that, you got to be sharper. You've got to be sharper than your male counterparts. And then it was like, am I giving easier questions? Am I letting the guys off easier? Am I harder on the women? So I've really had to look at that and tone it down on the ladies.
Yeah.
And bring it up a little bit on the fellas, just to make it more equal. But yeah, guilty.
Yeah. So going back to something you said earlier, Dr. Habecker, it seems like you've seen a transition in sexual harassment between physical versus more kind of subtle, verbal, but still, lo and behold, sexual harassment is there. And so how did we make that transition from one to the other? Like, was it Title IX, or I guess society in general? I guess kind of all the above.
Yeah, I mean, it when I was a graduate student, it became more prevalent to speak out. More people, there's a lot more education around sexual harassment, around sexual assaults, rape culture, all that was really kind of during that time period. I'm a little bit older, so this is like in the 90s, right? It was all that angry women music, like I said, I was listening to Alanis Morissette on the way over here.
Yeah, pump up jams.
Yeah. And then, it's moved into this more, again, subtle things. Like, I'm 52 years old, and one of my colleagues calls me kiddo. Really?
Just let that
call your male counterpart kiddo at this age? I mean, and we're experience-wise, this person has a little bit more experience, but we're pretty... We have the same academic rank, and it's stuff like that. It's that with students, I remember my first year in repro, talking about something, and I know this is shocking, but Pathoma and first aid had it wrong.
Never,
I know. And it took a really long time to convince the students that I was right. And so I actually went, and it was about the prostate. I
remember this, yeah.
Yeah, I went to a colleague of mine, and she is a prostate pathology expert. And she was like, no, you're right. Students still didn't believe me. So I had to look up the paper written by men. And then they seem to, and I think to myself, does Al Brady have that problem?
No.
Probably not.
No, I can guarantee you some people don't.
So it's that kind of thing that, and again, women do the same thing. So women doubt female professors more than male professors do.
I can't tell you how many people after a histology lab exam will either come find me, or like at the end in the room on the stage, or come to my office and argue about questions. And when you're prepping for boards, there can be multiple maybe this could work sort of answers, but you have to pick the best answer, right? But yeah, I literally had someone in my office this year tell me, well, that's not fair. And I was like, okay.
Well,
and them walking into Al Brady's office or Bill Elliott's office, oh my goodness gracious. And I don't know if it's just that they respect them so much, or respect me less, or I don't know.
But really do you think they would do that to Ben Wilson or Anthony Lyons,
there you go.
or someone younger? No,
I don't
think
know.
so. I don't know. Yeah.
I mean, there is a vision of what the authoritative academic is supposed to look like, and that's what it's supposed to look like. So you're kind of up against, serious academics don't wear bird shirts.
Yeah.
Dresses.
Yeah. Well,
I also wonder if there's an element of like ageism kind of in there too.
I think it's
yeah.
Well, I mean, we were talking, I said that, and Dr. Habecker like, no, it's not going to change. It doesn't get that much better.
And I think I've said this a couple of times, is that I thought when I turned 50 that the last thing I would have to worry about is someone, you talk about mansplaining. I'm an expert in immunohistochemistry, and I had a lesser experienced person try to tell me the basics of immunohistochemistry, and I was like, are you kidding me?
You can say it. Let it go.
Let it go.
Yeah.
Let it go.
It's good for the soul.
And so, and even here, I have a career that I came here with, and I'm still having to prove that I know what the hell I'm talking about. So it pisses me off that, I thought as I got older that I wouldn't have to worry about that as much, that I'd already proven myself. I was at the top
Cancer Research Center
in the world. and people are like, well, kiddo.
You're also a PhD, which at a medical school doesn't necessarily help.
That's true.
I think that there will always be kind of a tendency to rely more on clinical opinion. I'm making air quotes. I know that see those clinical opinion than on sort of the PhD's expert scientific opinion, which I always find kind of amusing
and infuriating.
A little infuriating.
I mean, we're literally trained to. No offense, Logan. We're trained.
This is what we're trained to do.
We are trained to think. You are trained to make connections and just provide a solution. Right? We are the ones that are thinking about drug targets, and
we made the solutions,
and you're just giving
Applying
them to people.
Looking them up on UpToDate.
Exactly. I mean, nothing like we can't compare to the clinical experience you guys have actually talking to patients and working through those difficult conversations between patients. But I mean, I guess we do it as people with each other. But
I saw a lot of patients.
Yeah, that's true in the clinic.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
But I mean, it definitely was a kind of a cultural thing, not just at our medical school. I'm sure at all medical schools.
Go ahead.
The
Hutch was the same way.
It was the same way at the University of Rochester too.
The story I wanted to tell and what kind of gave me the idea, I was like, oh my god, I got to do an episode on this topic. So I was in my psych rotation. And I was rotating with a preceptor who, I mean, she graduated medical school young anyway, so she's a young preceptor, and she also
Doogie Howser young, or
I think she went to medical school at the age of like.
Know who that is.
Yeah, I don't know.
Look at me dating myself.
She did go to medical school at age 21, so this was a very young, but she had a lot of years of experience. And either way, I'm in the clinic with her, and at that time I had my bigger beard, and I'm kind of like a big, loud person. And when we would round with patients and with their families, it happened on numerous occasions where the patients thought I was the doctor and she was my med student. And I would try to do the right things and introduce myself, and like, it drove. I imagine it happens to her all the time. And I didn't know how to make it any better. So can you guys offer any advice, or have you been in similar situations?
I mean, I think you did. The best thing was that you acknowledged it. You didn't just giggle and kind of laugh it off like it was no big deal, because to her it probably is a big deal. And she may not acknowledge it in that moment, but
she's probably crying in the bathroom about it.
She might be like an adult.
Stall.
Far
stall the bathroom.
But it wears on you, and we've talked about this sort of death of the thousand cuts analogy, and it's just these everyday things that sort of diminish who you are as a professional. And the patient doesn't mean to do, I mean, they have an implicit bias and they're just exercising it. And I'm sure that it's not done in a malicious way, but it just wears on you.
I think it contributes to imposter syndrome,
I feel like, wait, I should be the nurse.
Really, is this
Yeah.
really where I should be? Yeah, it was routine that any vendor who came in my lab, I ran $1 million lab, and they would come in and ask for the pathologist. And I'm like, well, that would be me.
Yeah.
And they're like, no, the pathologist in charge.
No, your boss. Yeah.
I'm like, what?
No, it's me.
Yeah.
No, that would be me. I'm still the boss here.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And same thing, you just kind of handle it like, well, actually, that's me, and try to move on. Somebody really was talking to a colleague of mine who used to be at the Hutch, and we were talking about gender and race issues, and he said, yeah, I bet when your students go on rotation, the male students are called doctor, the female students are called nurse, and your students of color are called janitorial. So again, I'm trying to keep it in perspective. We have to sit there and look at our biases and look at that and say, I'm not going to jump to the conclusion that you're not the nurse, right?
Well, I think, just taking a second to listen to the introduction, right, is that they just looked at you two and made assumptions, and then that's why it's so important to introduce yourself by your title. And I know just in general, women struggle with doing that. I mean, we have to walk into the room and say, I'm Dr. Mapes. Like, I can't tell you how many times here when I go to other conferences that I'm confused for a student, always.
Yeah.
Like, I was just at one, oh my gosh, I almost lost my mind. We're, discussing, and someone had asked me, like, oh, like, what are your goals for residency? And I was like, oh, no, I'm actually an assistant professor. And this medical student, this first-year medical student, turns to me and goes, oh, good for you. And I just sat there, and I took a deep breath, and I was like, yeah,
good for
I
you,
got out of the
kitchen.
Oh, gosh.
Was this at the diversity?
Yeah.
Oh,
yes. Such a good time.
We'll talk about that further after the recording.
Yeah.
So couple more questions. So, you sent me a few articles that talked about Title IX. And one thing, I know you guys are well versed in this. You've done like women in medicine panels at our school.
Trainings for all of the staff and faculty and administration on campus.
Yes. So perfect audience to ask this question. I'm gonna get you guys going here, hopefully. So the criticism that was in this article about Title IX is that the policy ends up protecting the institution rather than the victims. It ends up being ineffective. The university oftentimes end up ignoring complaints of the high-ranking faculty or whoever's being accused of the crime, and ended up just protecting them. Sadly, I agree with that criticism.
Mm-hmm.
We dealt with some sexual harassment on campus here, and quite frankly, that's how I would kind of characterize it. What are your thoughts?
Well, Title IX is only as good as you enforce Title IX.
Yeah.
So I have a little soft spot in my heart for Title IX because when I was in high school, I actually lettered in men's swimming because there was no women's swim team until we enforced Title IX, and then I could swim with my peers. Although I did letter in men's swimming. Yeah, but the regulations are only as good as the enforcement. So if you're not committed to accountability and to enforcement, it doesn't matter. So that's, and also if you don't understand that some of these infractions aren't just a little bra snapping or a little locker room talk, that yes, there was inappropriate language, there was inappropriate contact with students, and then some really inappropriate contact with students. It wasn't really thought of as a problem by some people. And plus, at the time of the reporting here, things got reported to 4 different places but never connected. So, I think there is, Title IX is not bad, but, again, when I first came here, I made a Title IX report. And it was for a student. And when we went that end of the year, I looked to see how many Title IXs had been reported, and they said 0. That's changed because I screamed bloody murder about it. But, again, there's also more outspoken folks on campus who are supporting students and faculty and staff by saying, no, I saw this too, or they reported it to me. I'm not going to let this go.
Yeah, I think I 100% agree with you that any sort of Title IX in principle is great. Like all of the language is there, but it's all in how it's applied and enforced. And then the other side of that is that you have to have a culture where reporting is encouraged, and where a student or a staff member or a faculty member or any kind of employee feels okay reporting, and that there won't be repercussions for that. And one of the things that made me personally really sad during the incident that we're discussing is that I've been here a really long time, right? And these things were apparently going on for a long period of time, and a student never came to me directly to express the concern. So I didn't have an opportunity to help them, to report that. And I could never quite figure out as I was working through this, is it because I didn't project that I was an advocate for the students? Is it because They thought that if I reported it, it wouldn't go anywhere. Were they scared that there would be repercussions? And so I think one of the big things that we need to work on at this institution and at any institution that's going to say they're going to support Title IX and enforce Title IX is creating a culture where you mean what you say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I agree. I mean, I don't know what else to add, but yeah, I like that the culture of accountability thing is huge, and I think that's the biggest issue with women reporting almost anything, any sort of issue, is it's a lot to do mentally and emotionally, and sometimes it's easier just to put it off and ignore it, and just, students had created a path line of warning each other and, keeping everybody informed, which is good that they're grouping together to protect themselves, but it shouldn't have been that way.
And we can't help if we don't hear it.
Yeah, but the problem is, though, we have to report. Yeah. If someone tells us something, we have to report it, and so, that may have been part of the concerns as well, as,
Well, they did report.
Yeah, and I was about to say, it eventually happened, and then it seemed to be more like a PR management cause and protecting the institution and making us look good and not going...
Well, you have to tell the right people, too. That's the problem, is you have to... If something happens, you have to tell the right person, the person that's actually going to do something about it, right? The person that's not going to say, oh, you're just being sensitive. Like, I'm sure it wasn't a big deal, so I'm not going to send it up. I'm not going to send it up the ranks because I don't think it's that big of a deal. We'll just discuss it between us, and then I won't report, even though I'm supposed to, and then,
Yeah. The article is quite accurate, because it's like, it seems like we are just protecting face and protecting, making our ranking go up, and, don't want to appear on the news in any bad light. It's just... It all seemed like horseshit to me. And,
Well, yeah, anyway. I mean, the outcome, it wasn't exactly the outcome that we all wanted. So I would say letting someone quit is not necessarily the outcome that I would have wanted. Mm-hmm. But it's the easy HR way.
Yeah.
I get it, but I don't like it.
Yeah, sucks balls. So you guys got to move into HR positions.
Oh, God, no. No, thank you.
Podcast on HR.
Yeah, no, I used to work in workers' comp insurance, and I've had more than enough. Yeah. Okay, different note, different question, and we still have to get to our great story of how I embarrassed you in front of 150 students.
I think you embarrassed yourself.
No, I am
possible.
Okay,
I guess possibly not.
Dr. Mapes, I am a strong masturbating advocate. Okay, it is good for physical health, mental health, stress relief.
Absolutely.
I mean, how do you think I got through medical school?
Yeah.
Like, come on.
I did not judge you.
Yeah.
I just told you to be careful. Right?
Yeah. I was not asking for me. I'm a happily married man, but I was a pubescent boy at some point. So yeah, we need to go into the story. So we were talking about, was it Meniere's?
Physician, know thyself.
No, not Meniere's.
Yes.
Peyronie disease.
Oh, I'm thinking Meniere's is the ear.
The ear, yeah.
How do you pronounce that again?
Peyronie.
I could never spell that. Yeah. But essentially what it is a penis that's 90-degree curved.
Yeah, because there's what's the pathogenesis? You're breaking my heart.
It's structural.
A benign tumor.
It's a tumor?
Yeah, it's a benign fibroblast tumor.
Oh. Well, either way, my question was, I'm like, okay, Dr. Habecker's up on stage with 30-foot pictures of curved penises. It was quite memorable. And so I asked the question, can that injury be induced through excessive use of masturbation?
No, that is not what you said.
What did I say?
Well, you asked me
That's how I remember
first, and it was something about, I thought you were asking about inflammation. And I was like, can this be caused by inflammation? I was like, I don't quite understand your question. And then you said, okay, Dr. Habecker, it's going to get weird.
Oh,
and I went, oh no. You did not use the term masturbation. Use the term self-love.
Ah, yes. Now I remember. Yes.
And then I said, are you talking about masturbation?
Yes.
Yeah. So
I kind of made it my mission on campus because I felt so many people were afraid to ask questions, good questions, and then so many people are afraid to make it a fun environment that I wanted to do both.
Yeah.
And I asked a lot of questions. Some were stupid, but some were good.
But you know what? If you can't talk about masturbation,
you shouldn't be a physician.
Then you shouldn't be a physician. I talk about I had the laugh because my husband goes, "You realize your header slide in your talk just says penis, right?"
Yes.
And I was like, "Well, that's what we're talking about.
It's get people's attention.
Yes, because science and real world is just so different. The world of science, and that great segue to my next question.
Oh, geez, fire.
So, because the article you sent me, another article you sent me, because you sent me like 18.
I just Aladdin.
I don't know.
I've opened up his eyes to this whole new world.
It was great. I learned quite a bit. But one interesting thing was comparing sexual harassment reporting at University of Texas. And it compared any majors versus STEM majors like science, technology, engineering, math, medicine? I don't know. Math. And it was the STEMmy ones, so the science majors reported more sexual harassment, and then medicine in particular reported even higher sexual harassment than just those other STEMmy majors. And you guys, I guess, were technically STEMmy majors, but now you work teaching medical students. So either way, how do you explain that? Why do you think that is?
Power dynamics.
But why are the power dynamics so different in science world, medicine world versus...
In graduate school, I mean, it was something that we talked about earlier, right? So imagine having your entire future as a physician. I mean, I know it's hard to have it based on board scores and things like that, right? But at least that's in your control. When you're a graduate student, basically our entire future is based on this committee saying that we're qualified to be where we are,
or one person,
and because you are working for one person, so you essentially have your principal investigator who is guiding your projects.
Logan just polished
and providing you with mentorship, and basically gets to decide what you do in their laboratory. And so that power dynamic is ginormous. And you run into the same kinds of things in medicine. So you have med students and preceptors. That's a huge power dynamic. You have residents and attendings, and that's a huge power dynamic. And so at every step of the way, there's an opportunity for that power to essentially be abused if the person wants to. So,
because it's primarily the men that are in those positions.
Yeah, you have to remember when you get to those levels, not a lot of women around. So,
and is most of the funding for these science research projects or whatever, is it mostly from the government or from the private sector, or?
It depends on the lab.
Yeah, it depends on the research too. I think it used to be a lot more from the government, but because of cuts to money that goes to this funding, I think, I'm sure you'd be surprised to know one of my friend's labs was funded by the Department of Defense.
Yeah.
I mean, that we've really had to reach out to a lot more funding opportunities, and usually it's more small
funding
grants.
From the Coca-Cola company in the postdoc lab, because we were doing some taste research. So there's a mix. Yeah.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah, academia in general is second only to the military for sexual harassment. And when I saw that, I was like, oh my god,
But it kind of makes sense.
It kind of makes sense.
Your PI is your commander, and you're sort of
and I should there's sexual harassment and gender bias that's often just from not really. So a lot of men will be paternalistic to women. So I've had this discussion a lot with Al Brady, because he sees his daughters, right? So he sees the struggle that his daughters have, and it's hard for him not to be fatherly. And sometimes that comes across as kind of like Al, I know.
I need you to be my colleague.
I need you to be my colleague. And then some of it is perpetrated by people who know exactly what they're doing. These people have a higher rate of scientific misconduct, of malpractice, of overprescribing medications. These are not nice people in general. So, there's kind of two, it's that, not really understanding, being kind of ignorant to what's going on. And then there's people that use it because they want that power dynamic. They like the power of that.
And you're vulnerable because at the undergraduate level, you're still trying to get into the program that's going to determine your future too, right? So that creates another situation where basically you're looking for letters of recommendation. You're trying to score really well in your coursework, and you're trying to get ahead. And so it just creates an environment where those things are more likely to happen. And then I think kind of touching on the idea that some of it's not, some of it's just a desire to be a mentor, to be a guiding light or what have you. But then again, it depends on who you choose to mentor, right? So, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and then, so I guess I have a few more questions, and they're more... I'm in a weird situation because I want to go into psychiatry, and psychiatry is mostly more women than men. And so I almost feel like I have an advantage entering into that field as a man. And I think the same argument would maybe be said of like pediatricians. You can't really find all that many male pediatricians. And it's just a strange dynamic. So I don't even know if it's a question I'm posing, but it just feels weird to me.
But I think there you end up doing kind of a weird gender thing there too. It's like men entering. Yeah, it's like men entering nursing.
Yeah. Or OBGYN maybe.
Yeah. Men entering
That's weird.
Being a pediatrician. Yeah. First of all, why do you want to be around all those kids?
Are you weird?
Yeah, I think people run into that. And plus, psychiatry, that's so touchy-feely.
Yeah.
So I think you're going to run into kind of a reverse gender bias on that.
Yeah, it's strange. Yeah, well, and then I guess the last question I want to ask you three is, so hopefully I make it through the last 2 years of med school and get the match here. Well, you guys aren't grading me anymore, so that's fantastic. No, just kidding. But, like I said, I hope to be one of your colleagues one day. So what would you say, though, to someone like me? How could we be better doctors and maybe one day educators around this subject? And how can we treat our colleagues better? How can we treat our female students better? And
I think you just pay attention. Just pay attention and listen. I think a lot of times we feel like something happens in the moment, and as women you're like, oh, well, that didn't feel right, but I'm sure it's no big deal. But then to have, this has happened to me multiple times where a male colleague would come and be like, oh my gosh, that thing that happened, and you're like, oh my gosh, yes, thank you so much. You noticed it, you validated my feelings. And I think that is hard for us a lot because, again, there's that second guessing and that tendency to just kind of push it aside and plow forward. But I think just noticing and just saying something. I mean, you don't have to rally and punch people or anything like that, but just even, and it's so dependent on the situation and on the person, but just making it known that you heard and you're aware or you saw, and just checking in with someone. So in that case, when you kept being confused for the doctor instead of the medical student, just kind of saying to your preceptor, that was really weird. How do you feel about that? Which I'm sure you would do anyway.
Let me challenge you.
How do you want me to respond?
Yeah. What do you want me to do when people say that?
Because with the incident we were alluding to earlier, I did actually see something, and then I went to the victim in this case, and I was like, hey, I saw that. Do you want me to say anything? And they said no.
Yeah, and that's fine.
And it was very, very strange to me. And then afterwards, I ended up reporting it anyway because I felt I needed to.
I'm sure they were embarrassed. I mean, it's so crushing. Yeah. You have no. I mean, it's so embarrassing. You just want to be a student. You're just, you're just trying to make it through the day, right?
Yeah.
And here you have this horrible, icky thing that just happened to you, and you're like, you know what? I need to make it through so just I can do my exam, and I got a CIL. And
sometimes people just don't have time to process those things. Like it's just too much at the time, and you're like, I can't handle all of these emotions right now, so I'm just gonna back burner it. And I think
loop back.
Yeah.
Loop back in a day.
But sometimes all you want is for the person to listen to you.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you don't necessarily want to report, because you do have to remember in certain situations all of the things that come with reporting, and you really have to let that person think all of that through when you're trying to make that decision. So, and you don't have to be a student to have these like, what the hell just happened kind of moments.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I was 6 years into my career here and had a really strange dynamic with someone in a meeting, and it just felt really bizarre, and it kind of shut me down in the meeting. I didn't want to express my opinion or say what I was thinking, and that's not really like me. And you know, after it was over, like, I knew that something icky had happened, but I couldn't really put my finger on it, and so I just went to a trusted colleague's office, in this case a man, and I sat down, and he could tell that I was upset, and I was like, I'm just gonna tell you what happened and you tell me what you think. And he was livid, like livid, and was ready to like run across the street to HR, and I was like, time out, you know, I need to think about that. And you know, I explained sort of everything that I was feeling, and you know, he kind of understood after that. He was like, oh yeah, you have to think this through every step of the way. And you know, I mean, the interaction happened with someone that was ranked considerably above me at that point, and so you know, you're processing all of those emotions, and so having another person go charging in with their sword playing white knight isn't necessarily what you need, or even want. You just need some time sometimes to be like, what the hell just happened?
Yeah, I would say, you know, any opportunity you have to mentor, you know, mentor young men, young women, you know, mentor people up, you know, making sure that you're giving people opportunities, that you're getting the time to get to know someone and say, wow, this woman keeps falling asleep in my class every day, you know, but she's doing really well on the tests. I want to know a little bit more about her. That's Dr. Mapes, by the way.
That's my story.
So, you
Thanks,
know,
Dr. Bone.
but a guy, I mean, a man had to, you know, so being able to mentor people around you, but also calling your colleagues to the carpet. And it doesn't have to be in the moment right there, but hey, bro.
Whatever language you all use.
Trying to make it, you know, fun and hip.
You know, hey, that kind of wasn't cool.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, I don't think you treated her really fairly, or you know, that person really fairly. And those are really difficult conversations to have.
There.
Yeah, they can be. I know we had that diversity inclusion week on campus, and there was this white male that came to my office, and he's like, I've had like 4 white males ask me when there was going to be a white men in medicine club. And I said, well, it's just called medicine. But also,
it's called history.
Yeah. But also, like, how do you feel about that? And he's like, I hated it, and I didn't know what to do. And it's, you know, kind of being able to take a step back and consider, you know, you are a much more open and understanding person. Like, you want to hear people's stories, but a lot of people feel threatened by women, right? So if we take a spot, then that's one less spot that they get automatically shuttled into because they have a penis, you know? So it's by keeping us down, they have more opportunities. And so I think that can also be a problem with, you know, with your classmates, with your fellow medical students. If, you know, the men see, you know, or just feel unsupported. I mean, it's valid. It is valid that we don't have a white men in medicine club, but we don't have one because they don't need the extra support to get to the starting line. They're already there. We need to help everybody get to that line so that then they can continue on with their careers.
Yeah, I often it's a little bit like, okay, you're going to run a race. You're running a marathon, and you're at the starting line, and you've had a good night's sleep, you had a ride to the starting line and a good breakfast that morning, but some people had to walk 20 miles to get to that starting line, and they didn't have breakfast, and they didn't have a professional trainer, and you know, you have to kind of think about what people needed to get to that line to begin with. And so you're not really starting at the same point. Your first day in medical school, you all weren't starting together. I mean, your first day in Sci-Pharm
No.
should have been.
Why?
Yeah.
This is not an episode about PTSD. Oestreich started that.
Great course.
It's a great course.
Yeah,
But
it's
you see
super
people
good.
doing
Yeah.
this, right? Because not everybody comes to medical school at the same, on the same level.
Or even has the same, things that they like. I mean, as a single woman, not married, I can go home and I can keep working, and I don't have to worry about going home and taking care of kids or cleaning up after a husband or something like that. Just have my dog, which is fine. She makes big messes.
Would
it's
you
okay.
clean up after your
No, I would. I would. That's
just clarifying.
valid point. But I mean, it's something that someone else at my level, one of my peers, would have so much extra work when they left, and they wouldn't be able to put in the extra time that I'm putting in. So it's, kind of considering, like, I used to, I'd lose my mind in undergrad when, like, people just be rolling through with A's, and I'm working my butt off to pay for school and doing research and sleeping. Like, don't ever do this. I was sleeping like 3 hours and waking up and taking no-dos with a Red Bull. Like,
Oh, damn.
It was bad, but it was like, this is what I need to do to succeed. And it got me to grad school. It helped me to be in the same program with a friend that went to Harvard. So it's like, whatever you need to do to succeed, you'll do. But I mean, everybody has different steps that they need to take to get to the same place.
No.
Don't ever do that.
Don't know. Oh, I used to regularly drink a 4-pack. My mom would buy me Red Bull by the case. And I would have like 3 cases of Red Bull in my bed because I'd just be like, do. It didn't matter. It wasn't. I literally had no senses left.
She has a heart condition now.
I was just a science zombie. Yeah. That's all I could do. Welcome to Chili's. How can I help you?
That's all I could do. One of my staff because she had a magnesium overdose.
Yeah. Oh wow.
From that, and she's cutting with this really sharp microtome blade.
Oh gosh.
And she's sliding down on the floor.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh my god.
Yeah.
Blood pressure is plummeting.
But women still do most of the unpaid work at home, so there's still that disparity there. So you happen to pick 3 women in science who don't have children.
Yeah.
Right.
For each.
Poor sample size.
Very important pets.
Yeah.
Spoiled important
but
pets.
there is still that
follow-up episode.
disparity.
I'll get some moms.
Yeah.
We'll even out. It'll be fine.
Yeah.
Any last final words for our listeners? Any words of advice? Words of complaints? Jokes of Logan?
Fuck the patriarchy.
She wanted to.
I'm just always ready to rage on the patriarchy. Should I say have a nice life?
It's been like an hour since you've said patriarchy.
I know. I would like it to be noted that at 8:06 p.m. on Monday, December 2nd, I did not say patriarchy first in this conversation. It was you.
I will.
Do you own a fuck the patriarchy?
I own a Tears of the Patriarchy mug, which Dr. Habecker gifted me.
We don't have a collection of feminist mugs.
Yeah.
Nice.
We have to express I think just, for women, find a support system. Find women that can even just be around when you complain about things that happen.
Or men.
But I think women have a better understanding. And so girl gang, you find a male ally. So Al Brady he's amazing, well-respected, old white man here on campus. And I love him. He is awesome. And he is always there for me to say those things, and even some other colleagues will make those comments or defend me in meetings when things come up or someone says something to me that is unwarranted. So I think having support from both sides is important, and I think for guys, just pay attention, just pay closer attention, and just start noticing things that people do and start noticing your own behavior is just a great first step. I mean, the changing of the behavior could happen later, and no one wants to change anybody's mind. If you think that women are inferior, then whatever, but just don't be an asshole. Don't be an asshole and do your job.
Yeah, I would say if you haven't read The Feminist Fight Club,
I have not.
Read The Feminist Fight Club.
Okay.
And take it as an opportunity to really get to know yourself. Because you can be your own worst enemy and not even know that you're doing it. Stop apologizing all the time. And if you are a woman, be there for other women. It's not a competition. We all, to quote Michelle Obama or someone luminary and much, much smarter and more dynamic than myself, we all rise together. And I think that that's really true. So we have enough problems trying to make our way against the tide of men. Don't fight one another. Yeah, so if you haven't read The Feminist Fight Club, that's my
no pink on pink violence.
No, yeah.
Oh God, I hate that term so much.
Pink on pink. I've never heard that term.
Pink on pink.
That's pretty funny.
Pink on pink aggression.
Yeah, I think to knowing that other people have similar experiences, so to not be afraid when you have those icky moments to talk to someone about it, and you have three women here who, if something's going on, or if you have a question, like if you're a guy and you're like, I don't know, did I do a thing? Yeah, you can talk to one of us and we can say,
what is the patriarchy, Dr. Habecker? Why does everybody hate me?
Yeah, what
we
is
don't
male
hate
privilege?
you.
Or I have this thing.
I don't think I can be alone in a room with a woman anymore.
Yeah. I hate that.
Yes, you can.
Yes, you can. Just don't
be weird.
Them or roll on them or call them, get out. But reach out and any one of us, we can hear what's going on and help you out and support each other.
Yeah. Yay, feminism.
Yeah. Well, this has been a pleasure. Thank you three for coming on. It's been super, super fun. If any of the listeners have any questions, reach out to me and I can forward those along to you.
Heck yeah.
But yeah, enjoy your, what day is it? Monday? Monday?
December 2nd.
Are the Vikings winning?
No, they are not. Thank you,
okay.
Logan. But my brother says we may not be out of this ... So go Vikings.
That's what I thought last night, and that wasn't quite the case.
Yeah, it's okay. So. The Patriots, we only care about the playoffs. It's fine.
Yeah, whatever.
We would just like to make it there.
Yeah. My professional team, the Ohio State University football team.
I'm pretty sure they can beat most NFL teams at this point.
Headed into probably the national championship.
They could certainly.
There you
Dolphins.
go.
Oh yeah. Probably
and we don't cheat like this.
See, women in academia.
I was about to say,
and in the podcast talking about football.
I didn't think of that.
Have we developed this as a coping mechanism to make ourselves fit in with the men though?
Yeah.
God.
No, I genuinely like football.
Women brain.
Take that away.
Stupid women brain.
Balls.
I like doing football.
Yeah. Tiger Woods.
I like balls.
Are you talking about balls then?
I am.
She took it down the
gutter. This is still all on the recording.
Again, okay. I would like it to be noted that I didn't take it in the gutter. I'm doing so well here today.
All right. Now,